Have you ever imagined what it would be like if, in the midst of so many uncertainties in the modern world, there was a figure so powerful that he could manipulate entire nations, offering solutions that, at first glance, seem miraculous? Well, this figure has been announced thousands of years ago, and what it will do may shock even the most skeptical. Biblical prophecies speak clearly about the rise of a leader who will position himself as a savior, but who, in truth, will bring destruction and pain. The Antichrist, a name that arouses both fear and curiosity, is not just a mythological character, but someone who is preparing to change the course of history, and his relationship with Israel will be the epicenter of it all. But what few will see is the price that will be charged for this apparent solution: freedom. In exchange for manufactured stability, people will have to submit to control that infiltrates every aspect of everyday life. It will be impossible to function in society without following the rules established by the Antichrist, and these rules, of course, will only favor those who follow him blindly. Think about what we've experienced recently with so many new regulations being imposed globally, all seemingly for the common good. In the case of the Antichrist, these rules will go further, little by little removing people's autonomy, until they are completely dependent on his will. Those who oppose this control will be in a desperate situation. If they do not accept the Antichrist's orders, they will be left on the margins of society, without access to the most basic resources. Imagine a scenario where someone can't buy food, have a job, or move freely because they haven't adhered to the system they created. This scenario seems absurd, but it is a grim reflection of the direction the world can take when power is centralized in the wrong hands. This kind of absolute control doesn't come out of nowhere. It is built step by step, as people give up small parts of their freedom in exchange for security or comfort. And here we come to the crucial point. How will the Antichrist be able to impose this global submission? Well, the key lies in its initial alliance with Israel, a strategic move that will give it both power and credibility in the eyes of the world. It's not just a matter of domination by force, but of using smart tactics to position yourself as the undisputed leader. Right at the beginning of his reign, the Antichrist will make a peace pact with Israel. This alliance is a smart and strategic move, as he knows that gaining Israel's trust will give him prestige in the eyes of the world. Imagine the scene. A leader emerging in the midst of a tense scenario, offering solutions to conflicts that seemed impossible to resolve. The promise of peace is always something irresistible, and by guaranteeing Israel's security, the Antichrist positions himself as a peacemaker, someone who finally manages to achieve something that many generations have tried but failed. It's like offering candy to a hungry child hard to resist, especially when the promise seems so good. This pact, however, is far from being a true peace commitment. It is, in fact, a temporary truce, a carefully calculated ruse. For 3.5 years, the Antichrist will maintain the facade of protector, gaining the trust of Israel and its allies. But behind every kind word and diplomatic gesture, there is a dark intention: to prepare the ground for his betrayal. It's a double game, in which he just waits for the ideal moment to show his true face. It's not the first time we've seen something like this in history. How many leaders have promised peace only to later reveal completely different intentions? The Antichrist is a master of this art of deception, promising what people want most while keeping his own interests hidden. And then, when the 3.5 years are up, the mask will fall. The trust he had gained will be used against those who placed it in him. Imagine the pain of being betrayed by someone you blindly trusted. That's the feeling Israel and many others will experience when the peace pact is broken. The Antichrist will not only break his promise, but he will do so in a way that makes it clear that everything was just a deception to achieve a greater objective: total control. It is at this moment that he will show himself in his true nature, disrespecting the agreements made and showing that his objective was never peace, but rather power. And what will come next? An action that will reveal his boldness and total disregard for the faith of others. He will desecrate the Jewish temple and force the world to worship him. This is the moment when things turn from diplomacy and manipulation to open and unapologetic domination. The betrayal of the covenant with Israel is just the beginning of an escalation of events that will bring the entire world to its knees before him, and what happens in the temple will be a symbol of this dramatic turn in the power game. After breaking his peace pact with Israel, the Antichrist will take his boldness to an even more frightening level by desecrating the Jewish temple, an action known as the abomination of desolation. Imagine the scene, a sacred place, filled with historical and spiritual significance, being violated by someone who respects nothing but his own power. The Antichrist not only invades this sacred space, but sets up an idol, an image of himself, and demands worship. For those who follow the Jewish faith, this is one of the greatest offenses possible, a true insult to their belief and to everything that the temple represents. But it is not just a question of religion or symbolic desecration. The demand for worship of the Antichrist is a calculated move to consolidate his power in a personal and direct way. By forcing the world to venerate him, he wants to eliminate any other form of devotion and loyalty. It is a way of dominating not only the body, but the soul of your followers. This is reminiscent of the ancient Roman emperors, who also declared themselves gods, expecting to be worshipped by their subjects. However, here the scale is global, and the imposition is absolute. Anyone who refuses to perform this worship will, in practice, place themselves in a situation of open resistance, a resistance that will be brutally punished. At this moment, many people will face a terrible dilemma. Either they submit to the Antichrist and abdicate their beliefs, or they face severe consequences, which could include persecution, marginalization, and even death. For those who have faith, the choice is painful but inevitable. This situation reminds us of other historical moments, such as the persecution of Christians in the first centuries, or of Jews during the Holocaust, moments when keeping the faith meant risking everything, even one's own life. But this time, the scale is much larger, and the world leader himself is the one imposing this decision. Perhaps you are wondering, what makes Israel the focus of so many prophetic events? The answer lies in the central role that this small nation plays in the unfolding of humanity's spiritual history. The Antichrist knows this, and that is precisely why he will begin his reign by making a peace pact with Israel, a move that will seduce many and deceive even the most prudent. But things are not what they seem. This pact, which at first will bring a sigh of relief to the world, hiding the true nature of this character, will, over time, reveal his darker face. All of this serves to set the stage for the inevitable next step, the definitive stamp of Antichrist's control over the world economy. By setting up an idol and demanding worship, he is paving the way to introduce a system that will make any form of practical resistance impossible. The cult of the Antichrist will not just be a matter of faith, but of survival, a harbinger of things to come, where the mark of the beast will play a crucial role in defining who can buy, sell, and even live within the system that he will create. Economic control through the mark of the beast is one of the most harrowing elements of the Antichrist prophecy. Imagine a world where every transaction, every purchase, and every sale depends on a single brand. Without it, no one can buy or sell anything, not food, not medicine, not even the most basic goods. This mark is not just a symbol, but a passport to survival in a system completely dominated by the Antichrist. Think about how, today, many of our transactions have already become digital, and how dependence on technology has brought us closer to this idea of absolute control. Imagine this technology being taken over and used against us, forcing us to make choices that challenge our own morality. The mark of the beast represents complete submission to the power of the Antichrist. Receiving this mark is not a trivial choice. It is a total and public commitment of loyalty to his regime. Just as in ancient times slaves were marked with the symbol of their owners, people will be marked to indicate who they belong to. But unlike traditional slavery, this mark seems to come with the promise of security and stability. Mark yourself and live in peace, is what he will say, but the peace offered will only be the illusion of freedom under absolute control. Those who refuse to accept this mark will be in a desperate position, deprived of any means of support, and relegated to the margins of society. And it is worth remembering that economic control is one of the most effective ways of subjugating the masses. When someone cannot feed their family or have access to essential medical care, resistance becomes an almost impossible task. Many end up giving in, not because they believe in the system, but simply to survive. It's a lesson history has taught us time and time again. Control over resources is control over people. Mark of the Beast fits this pattern, but on a global scale. It will be, in a way, the symbol of the greatest power game ever played, where the price of participation will be your own soul. And that's when the lines between survival and faith become even more blurred. By requiring the mark to buy and sell, the Antichrist is not only controlling commerce, but he is drawing a very clear line between those who are his followers and those who dare to resist. This creates an inevitable scenario of escalating tension, where those who oppose the system will be forced into hiding or fighting against it. This escalation will eventually lead to the final conflict, the Battle of Armageddon, where all armies will come together for a clash of epic proportions, with the future of humanity at stake. The Battle of Armageddon will be the culmination of the Antichrist's journey. Imagine all the armies of the world gathered, lined up for an epic battle, and not for any reason, but to try to destroy Israel, which has become the symbol of resistance against its absolute power. The enormity of this event is beyond our comprehension. It is as if all the forces of evil decided to unite for a definitive confrontation against any hope of freedom. Armageddon is not just a physical battle, but a spiritual battle. It is the moment when all the evils of humanity attempt to challenge Christ himself. The Antichrist, in his arrogance, believes he can win. He brings together a coalition of forces, using all the influence he has acquired throughout his rule. For many, the sight of these troops and war machines moving toward Israel will be terrifying, a reminder of how close we are to the end. But the great irony is that the Antichrist, in his insatiable quest for power, underestimates the opponent he is about to face. This is the culmination of his delusion of grandeur. He considers himself unbeatable, but he is about to face a force that goes beyond human understanding, something that no army, no matter how powerful, can defeat. It is precisely in this moment of despair, when it seems that Israel is about to be annihilated, that divine intervention occurs. Jesus Christ returns to save those who are about to be crushed, and this is where the Antichrist's entire strategy begins to fall apart. Imagine the shock of those who blindly followed the Antichrist, trusting that he could win, only to see him stunningly and definitively defeated. All his power, all his influence, everything he built, is undone in a single instant by the arrival of the one he thought he could defeat. And when the dust of the battle finally settles, what remains is a scene of destruction, but also of hope. Because the defeat of the Antichrist is not just victory over a tyrannical leader, it is victory over all the evil he represents. But this battle is not the end of the story, just the beginning of a new chapter. Now it remains to deal with the consequences and the destruction it caused, and understand how the world can be rebuilt after such a devastating conflict. The fate of the Antichrist and his followers after this defeat will be a definitive example of the price to be paid by those who choose the path of iniquity. After the defeat at the Battle of Armageddon, the fate of the Antichrist and his followers will be a true demonstration of divine justice. The prophecy describes a stunning and shocking scenario. The Antichrist and all those who followed him will meet inevitable destruction, their bodies left to be devoured by birds of prey. This end is more than just the conclusion of a physical battle. It is the symbolic outcome of an entire trajectory of arrogance, corruption, and evil. Imagine the scene, a battlefield littered with wreckage, with the remains of those who dared to defy Christ's strength laid bare to be consumed. The approaching birds are more than just predators. They are like the final act, nature cleaning up the remains of evil. It is about these events that we will talk, unveiling the steps of the Antichrist and how he will infiltrate people's lives not only in Israel, but around the world. Let's see how he will seduce nations, break pacts, and establish control so deep that even buying a loaf of bread will become impossible without his mark. What the Antichrist will do in Israel is just the beginning of a story of power, manipulation, and a resistance that will rise against him. And the scariest thing? These prophecies are closer to our reality than we imagine. What we see here is the definitive representation of the fragility of the Antichrist's power, which appeared so imposing and invincible. In the end, his body is left at the mercy of nature, without any glory, without any honor. His entire promise of power and domination crumbles in a single instant, and his followers, those who believed his seductive words and accepted the mark of the beast, face the same fate. The Antichrist, who desired to be worshipped as a god, is reduced to dust, a reminder that no human or diabolical power can withstand divine judgment. This end is a definitive example of how pride precedes the fall, and how the power built on injustice is ephemeral. The symbolism of the end of the Antichrist also serves as a powerful warning to us all. It is a reminder that justice may take time, but it arrives, and those who follow paths of corruption, betrayal, and manipulation face, sooner or later, the consequences of their actions. This outcome also carries an important message. Those who resisted, those who did not give in to the mark of the beast, those who remained firm in their faith, will finally see justice being done. For those who have remained faithful, this is the moment when all the pain and suffering make sense, as they see the triumph of good over evil, of truth over lies. But this is not the complete end of the story. What happens after this trial of the Antichrist and his followers is a milestone in the new beginning of humanity. Now that evil has been defeated, the question remains, how will the earth be rebuilt? How will people move forward after living under the tyranny and control of the Antichrist? These questions take us to the next step, to the moment of reconstruction and renewal, where hope can finally flourish without the shadows of evil. After the destruction of the Antichrist and his followers, the time comes for the restoration and renewal of the world. Imagine a scenario where, after all the darkness, dawn finally arrives, bringing with it the promise of a new era. With evil defeated, humanity has the chance to rise from the rubble and start over, learning from the mistakes of the past and looking to a future of peace and justice. This is a period of hope where everything can be rebuilt with new foundations. Just as after a devastating storm the sun rises, bringing warmth and renewal, this is the time to rebuild everything that was broken. But restoration is not just physical, it is also spiritual and emotional. After years of fear, oppression, and control by the mark of the beast, people now have the opportunity to live free, without the constant shadow of tyranny. It is a time when values such as solidarity, respect, and faith can flourish again. For those who survived and remained faithful, this is the time to unite, to build something new and more fair. The community, which for so long has been fragmented and controlled, can now grow stronger and find its purpose again. It's like rebuilding a house that was destroyed by a hurricane, brick by brick, but now with a more solid foundation, where everyone participates. However, restoration also brings with it challenges. The world does not simply return to the state it was in before the rule of Antichrist. The scars of oppression will still be present, and the healing process will not be immediate. Many who have lost their loved ones, their possessions, and even their identity will need time to heal. But it is exactly this human resilience, the ability to rise after the greatest difficulties, that makes this period so important. Restoration is not just about rebuilding what was destroyed, but about doing it better than before. Imagine what it would be like if each person decided to contribute a small act of kindness, of supporting others. These small acts, when multiplied by thousands, become the foundation of a new world. And it is precisely in this restoration that we see the true triumph of light over darkness. It is not just victory in a battle, but the victory of a collective spirit, of a humanity that refuses to be defeated. When looking to the future, people will have to remember what the Antichrist was, the empty promises, and the destruction he brought. But, more than that, they will also remember the ability to resist, not to bow down, and to believe in something greater. The world that emerges from this restoration is a world where faith is renewed, where the prophecies that warned of evil now serve to guide good. And this is just the beginning of a new journey, a journey of construction and hope, where everyone has a role to play in the future of humanity. We have reached the end of this journey on the actions of the Antichrist and the impressive biblical prophecies. But before we close this narrative, it is essential to reflect on what all this means for us today. All of these stories and prophecies challenge us to make a choice, the choice between submitting to the seduction of illusory power or standing firm in our values and faith. It's easy to get carried away by the promise of security and comfort, but are we willing to pay the price that comes with it? This is a provocative but necessary question. The most important thing now is how you will act. We cannot just passively watch as the world moves towards the described scenario. What actions can we take to ensure that we are not seduced by the same narrative that has deceived so many in prophecy? What values do we need to cultivate in our lives, and how can we protect our spiritual and emotional freedom from negative influences? This reflection is not just theoretical, it has real implications for our daily lives. Think about it. What have you done to strengthen your faith and convictions? Are you prepared to face a world where moral decisions can define your future? If this content made you question, reflect, or feel motivated to understand more about what's to come, then I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Let's continue unraveling these mysteries together and exploring what the prophecies have to say about our present and our future. Get ready to delve into the details of this narrative, to understand how these prophecies connect to the world we live in today, and, most importantly, what this means for each of us. Because in the end, the question is not just about what the Antichrist will do, but how we will be prepared for what is to come. Want to know more? So come with me on this journey, because what we are going to reveal could completely change your perspective on the future and each person's role in this scenario. Turn on notifications, share this knowledge, and get involved, because what's at stake is much more than simply understanding the past. It's preparing for the future. Let's together build an understanding that strengthens us, prepares us, and unites us in the search for answers in uncertain times. And remember, knowledge is the most powerful weapon against any form of control. Are you prepared to move forward? In biblical texts, the Antichrist is described with 25 different titles, each reflecting a dark aspect of his nature. Among the best known are the Man of Sin and the Wicked One. These titles are much more than just names. They carry the weight of a prophecy that has aroused disquiet in many generations. When we talk about the Antichrist, it is not just a mythical figure from the past that comes to mind, but an entity that stands out for its perverse nature and skillful manipulation. Imagine the most cruel historical figures like Hitler or Stalin, and now try to see someone whose malignancy goes beyond any of these references. Sounds scary, doesn't it? The Man of Sin, for example, illustrates well the idea of someone who embodies human corruption itself. He not only commits sins, but embodies them in such a profound way that he becomes a personification of what we fear most about the destructive potential of human beings. This reference shows us that the Antichrist is not just a powerful leader, he is the very symbol of the worst in humanity. And how many leaders throughout history have emerged promising salvation, only to drag multitudes to ruin? Thus, the title, The Wicked One, reinforces the idea of someone who operates without any regard for right or wrong. This personification of iniquity makes the Antichrist a master of manipulation. His titles are not just labels, but are indicative of how he will be perceived, not as a typical tyrant, but as someone seductive, charismatic, and, at the same time, terrifying. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing who gains trust before showing his true face. Think about how many times we have been deceived by beautiful promises from people who, at their core, just wanted power. These titles remind us that we should always question the intentions of those in power and be alert to signs of deception and manipulation. And it is at this point that we come across the next step in his journey of power, the idea of total control over the world. The Antichrist will not be content with just titles. He seeks complete domination, and this is something he will begin to manifest in strategic and seductive ways, leading people to give up their freedoms almost without realizing it. Who has never been carried away by promises that seem to solve all our problems? Thus, the title is not the end, but the beginning of a relentless quest for global power. The Antichrist's control over the world is one of the most feared and mentioned parts of the prophecies. Unlike any other leader we know, the Antichrist's power is not limited to one country or region, but extends across all nations, breaking borders and consolidating global hegemony. Imagine a leader capable of winning the loyalty of both political leaders and the common population, using a mix of charisma, fear, and promises of peace. He doesn't need traditional armies to control. Your strength lies in your ability to persuade and manipulate. This domination will take place through seductive promises, such as solving the problems that most afflict humanity, poverty, wars, environmental crises, and for a brief moment, many will believe that he is the solution.